Maplewood Lane had a reputation: manicured lawns, silent nights, and not a single trash bin left out past Monday. The kind of neighborhood where the birds chirped politely and the squirrels seemed to wait for crosswalks. That peace didn't last long. Once Derek Palmer moved in, Derek wasn't loud by any modern standard. He didn't blast music or throw drunken parties. He hosted game nights once a week, every Friday, in his finished basement. A handful of friends, laughter, snacks, and the occasional victory shout when someone pulled off a perfect strategy. In Settlers of Catan, it was innocent, harmless, fun, unless your name was Karen Densmore. Karen lived directly across the street. 60 years old, gray bob haircut, and a look that could curdle milk. President of the HOA for 6 consecutive years. The type who called the city over a lawn being mowed 1 inch too short. Her porch had a camera aimed squarely at Derek's house, not for protection but surveillance. The first night, she stared out her window as Derek's friends arrived. 6 cars, all parked legally. They walked in laughing, one holding a cheesecake. At 10:15 p.m., a sudden burst of laughter carried out from the basement window. Karen's teacup rattled. By Monday morning, Derek found a note folded and wedged under his doormat. Please keep noise to a minimum after 8 p.m. Residents value their peace. Karen DHOA, Derek chuckled. He replied with a polite text, letting her know it was a quiet gathering and he'd do his best to keep it down. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The next Friday, Karen stood across the street with binoculars. She timed how long each car stayed. The moment laughter echoed again, she picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers knocked at Derek's door. Confused, but cooperative, Derek let them peek inside. The officers found 7 people playing Clue and eating hummus. They apologized and left. Karen wasn't done. The following week, Derek received a formal violation notice from the HOA. The letter accused him of hosting unauthorized events and violating quiet hours outlined in the community guidelines. There was no such clause. Derek checked twice. He took the letter to Linda Mulligan, a former HOA member who'd stepped down years earlier after a messy election Karen won by 1 vote. Linda squinted at the paper, then smirked. She's trying to set a precedent. If no one fights her, she wins by default. Derek shrugged it off for now. Why Friday came again. This time, Derek decided to have some fun. He asked his friends to come dressed as mimes. No one spoke a word. The only sounds were cards shuffling and soft jazz. Still, Karen called the police. They didn't show up this time, but Derek's security footage showed Karen walking up to his window and recording on her phone. Not of the noise, of him, his guests, their license plates. Derek felt it then. This wasn't about noise. It was personal. The next week, Derek found his mailbox open and empty. A neighbor reported seeing Karen examining it that morning. Then came the fines. $50 for a supposed unsightly garbage bin. Another for a non-compliant porch light. Suddenly, Derek's house had racked up over $300 in bogus fees. Karen wasn't subtle anymore. One evening, as Derek watered his lawn, she marched up in her pink sweater and pearls and said flatly, "One more Friday night, and I promise this won't end well for you." Derek smiled. That Friday, he hosted the biggest game night yet. 15 people, a taco bar. He installed soundproofing. Everyone parked at a nearby park and walked in silently. At midnight, Karen's lights flicked on. She paced on her lawn, phone in hand, pointing at his house. Derek stood behind his curtain, watching. He wasn't worried, because the next morning, at precisely 9 a.m., he met with a city planner about the empty lot right next to Karen's house. And he had a proposal, not just for a building, for a revolution. The game had officially begun. Derek knew one thing about petty power: never meet it with anger, meet it with precision and planning. Which is why he found himself at a folding table outside City Hall, sipping cold coffee across from a woman named Janine Mercado. She handled zoning approvals, and she just so happened to have a strong dislike for HOAs. Especially ones that tried to reclassify bingo as an unregistered public nuisance. Derek pulled out a small folder labeled Phase 1. Inside were blue and skling modest, and just ambiguous enough to pass initial review. A community engagement space, multi-purpose, non-profit, private funding. Janine raised an eyebrow. And you plan to build this? Where? Again. He pointed at a plot on the site map. The lot directly east of 116 Maplewood. It's never been developed. I'm buying it. Janine gave a slow whistle. That's bold. That's right next to Karen Dinsmore's house. Derek nodded. Exactly. Back on Maplewood Lane, Karen wasn't slowing down. After her failure to get the police involved, she pivoted hard. A new letter arrived at Derek's home. This one typed, legal language, HOA, letterhead. It was a cease and desist. The accusation: Derek was allegedly hosting unlicensed commercial gatherings, which may require city permits under communal entertainment ordinances. He laughed when he read it. But the more he thought, the more he realized Karen was trying to bait him into defending himself in court. If he got angry and pushed back the wrong way, she could twist it into grounds for further action. possibly even revoking his community membership privileges. So Derek played a different game. He hosted another game night, but this time, it was themed library night. No laughter, no dice. Just people reading quietly in a circle, playing chess, and drinking herbal tea. Karen called the HOA emergency line twice. No violations occurred. The next morning, Derek awoke to a small crowd gathered near his driveway. Yellow notices were stapled to his fence posts. Notice of violations. Pending HOA board hearing. Karen was escalating. That afternoon, he drove to Linda Mulligan's house, the only person in the neighborhood who had once beaten Karen at anything. Her garden smelled like lavender and rebellion. She's trying to stack minor violations until you're in violation of Clause 11B, Linda explained. 3 minor violations within 60 days can result in forced arbitration. Arbitration leads to HOA-controlled penalties, fines, restrictions, even liens if they're persistent. Derek leaned back in his chair. She's not just annoyed anymore. She's trying to force me out. Linda smiled faintly. Karen doesn't hate game night. Karen hates not being in control. That's when Derek told her the plan. When she heard it, she sat up straight, blinking. You're serious? He nodded. She started laughing. You're going to build a club. Next to her house, 4 games. Not just 4 games, Derek said. For everyone she's ever ticked off. The very next week, a truck pulled up to the empty lot beside Karen's home. It began clearing brush and marking soil samples. Karen stood in her bathrobe, arms crossed, watching every move. 2 days later, Derek placed a small sign at the edge of the lot. Coming soon, Maplewood Commons. Community conversation and card games. Karen nearly dropped her iced coffee when she saw it. That night, she pounded on Derek's door. You're not authorized to build a commercial facility in this neighborhood, she snapped. It's not commercial, Derek said coolly. It's a private members-only club, for recreation. She tried to reply, but he raised a finger. And before you ask, yes, I read the bylaws. I'm within every guideline. And no, the HOA has no jurisdiction over independently zoned property. Outside the association's deed-restricted coverage, Karen stared at him like he'd spoken Latin. Derek smiled. Good night, Karen. As the door closed, Karen stood there in silence, the porch light washing her face in yellow. She wasn't just mad now. She was something else. Desperate. And desperation is dangerous. Because the next morning, Derek discovered his trash can had been pushed over and smeared with some kind of jelly. His car windows were scratched, not deep but deliberate, and tucked. Into his mailbox was a single, unsigned note. You've made a mistake. Derek held the note between his fingers, eyes narrowing. He wasn't sure what Karen was planning, but he knew one thing. He wasn't the only person. She'd done this too, and someone else, someone who knew Karen's darkest secrets, was about to knock on his door. What they revealed would change everything. It was a Sunday morning when the knock came. Derek had just stepped out with his usual cup of black coffee, eyeing the freshly poured foundation on the empty lot next to Karen's. He was halfway through sipping when the knock hit again harder. This time, he opened the door expecting a delivery. Instead, he found a woman. Mid-60s, short gray curls, a sunflower pin on her sweater. She looked vaguely familiar, like someone you'd seen in a yearbook photo from decades ago. You don't know me, she said, but I know her. She nodded her head toward Karen's house across the street. My name's Linda Mulligan. I used to sit on the HOA board before she pushed me out. Derek had heard of Linda. Rumors of the Great Garden scandal circulated when he moved in. Karen had allegedly accused her of growing unapproved wildflowers in front of her porch. The board sided with Karen. Linda quit. They sat on Derek's porch while she laid everything out. She's not trying to stop your noise. She's trying to bait you into crossing a line so she can activate the one clause no one talks about, 11B. Derek frowned. Everyone keeps mentioning that. What is it, exactly? Linda leaned closer. Clause 11B gives the HOA power to open arbitration and demand sale of a home if the owner is found guilty of ongoing disruption to community harmony. It's vague on purpose. No one's dared challenge it in court because legal fees alone would sink them. Derek's mind raced. Karen wasn't just annoyed by his game nights. She was building a case. Each violation, each complaint. It was part of a slow, bureaucratic trap designed to push him out completely. I tried to challenge her once, Linda added. Started a petition to restructure the HOA's charter. She followed me, recorded my conversations, sent anonymous complaints to the city about my backyard being a fire hazard. Then one day, I found a dead possum left on my doorstep. Derek blinked. She has a way of hiding her worst behind HOA policy, Linda continued. And if she feels like she's losing control, she doesn't stop. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. His window overlooked Karen's home. Her porch light was still on at 2 a.m. She was standing there, just standing motionless, arms crossed, staring toward the empty lot like it was mocking her. The next day, a new fine arrived. $154 non-standard signage on visible property. It referred to the Maplewood Commons coming soon sign. 2 hours later, Derek received a certified envelope. Inside, a notice to appear before the HOA board for persistent community disturbance and non-compliance with advisory guidance. She was accelerating, but Derek had a countermove. He called Janine from zoning, made sure every permit on the community club was airtight. Then he contacted a friend, Gina Chen, a real estate attorney with a nasty skill for turning vague policies into legal Swiss cheese. He also kept Linda close. She agreed to attend the upcoming hearing as a former board member. Quietly, of course. The day of the hearing, Derek walked into the HOA clubhouse with a calm grin. Karen sat at the far end of the board table, eyes sharp, her HOA pin gleaming like a weapon. The board looked uneasy. 3 other members, all visibly uncomfortable. One even avoided Derek's eyes. Karen went first. She rolled out a spreadsheet of noise complaints, HOA letters, even a blurry photo of Derek's friends carrying board games. Excessive disturbances, ongoing community discomfort, violation of peace standards, she droned. Derek waited patiently, then handed each board member a copy of city zoning approvals, noise testing reports, and a signed letter from Janine confirming no violation had occurred. Finally, he played a short audio clip from his phone, Karen's voice, recorded through his security cam, whispering during one of her nightly porch stalks. "We'll drown him in paper. He'll leave. They all do." Silence. One board member looked stunned. Another leaned back in his chair, blinking rapidly. Karen turned pale. The meeting ended early. No vote was taken. No action moved forward. But later that night, Derek noticed something strange. Karen's car wasn't in the driveway. Instead, a moving truck had pulled into the curb. For a moment, he thought she was giving up. Until he saw the "for sale" sign staked into her lawn, and the name on the listing, Patricia D. Real Estate Solutions. No agent by that name had a license. Derek realized it too late. Karen wasn't moving. She was staging, and what she was about to do next would take this petty war to a place no one thought it would go. Days Karen's house sat with a "for sale" sign in the front yard. Neighbors slowed down as they passed it, whispering, speculating, wondering if the queen of the HOA had finally been dethroned. Derek wasn't so sure. He hadn't seen her pack a single box. Then came the showings. 5 cars pulled into her driveway. On Tuesday, all with out-of-state plates, a young couple in sandals, a woman in a pantsuit holding a clipboard, a teenager filming with her phone. Something felt, staged. Derek checked the listing online. It was vague. No price, no interior photos, no agent contact number, just a single email, and the name, Patricia D. It was a smokescreen. She wasn't selling. She was watching, using fake buyers to scout Derek's construction progress. By Thursday, concrete was being poured. Framing had started. The foundation for the Maplewood Commons clubhouse was taking shape, just 12 feet from Karen's property line. Derek expected the screaming match that followed. She waited until Saturday morning to storm across the lawn, with a rolled-up document in one hand and a freshly brewed cup of vengeance in the other. "You're in violation of Municipal Code 17.32, she snapped, shaking the paper like it owed her money. Derek had just finished checking the drainage trench, wiped his hands and looked at the paper. It was a copy of an obscure zoning ordinance regarding setback regulations for structures adjacent to residential lots. "This only applies to commercial builds," he said calmly. Karen's grin widened. "I filed a motion to reclassify your clubhouse." He blinked. "You what?" "I submitted a petition to the city council. If they approve it, you're over the line and construction has to stop. Permanently." She walked away before he could respond. Derek didn't panic yet, but he did call Janine from the zoning office. Her tone was tense. "You've got a problem," she said. "Somehow your community space has been listed on the agenda for next week's city zoning meeting. Someone is pushing for a reclassification. If it passes, you'll need a variances. Take Monsu submitted it." He asked. She hesitated. Name was blocked. Filed through a proxy attorney. It was Karen, no doubt. Derek called Gina, his attorney friend, and within 2 hours, they were prepping for the hearing, but they weren't going to play defense. They were going to flip the board. At the city zoning meeting, held in a cramped municipal building with buzzing fluorescent lights, Karen showed up with a stiff smile and a leather binder. Derek walked in with an easel. He presented first, blueprints, permit approvals, noise impact reports, a neighborhood support petition signed by over 40 residents. He played a 2-minute clip of local kids talking about how excited they were to have a space for weekend game nights and community chess. Then he unveiled the kicker, a letter from the city's community wellness office, endorsing the build as a mental health positive initiative. The room murmured. Then Karen stood. She delivered a speech about peace, about preserving neighborhood serenity, about rising property values and outsider influence. She never once said the word games. She didn't have to, but the board wasn't convinced. One member asked, "Have there been any documented disturbances?" Karen paused, then opened her binder. Inside were printed screenshots of Derek's social media, text threads from an anonymous number, and alleged testimonials non-verified. It wasn't enough. The board voted 5-1 in favor of allowing construction to continue. Karen stood frozen as the gavel dropped. Derek nodded politely and walked past her, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The next day, a new sign went up in front of the construction site, Maplewood Commons, now approved by City Council. The local paper ran a headline that read, "Game Club Beats HOA Blockade." Derek thought it might be over. Until he got a call from the delivery company. "Sir, we've had 3 missed attempts dropping off your flooring materials. Says the address is under temporary restriction due to an HOA lien." His stomach dropped. Karen had filed a property lien on his actual home. Not the club. His house. She claimed unpaid fines. Fines Derek never received. He raced to his mailbox. Inside was a letter dated 5 days earlier, stamped with a red final notice. It listed 4 violations. 3 were duplicates. 1 referred to unauthorized yard signage. The total $1,750. The envelope had been back. The ink still smelled fresh. She was trying to block his funding, choke off the construction, 1 inch at a time. But Derek wasn't about to fold, because hidden in his home office drawer was a flash drive. On it, a full month's worth of surveillance footage. And 1 clip that could not only end Karen's presidency. It could end her entire Saturday morning hit with a thick summer heat and the sound of hammers on fresh lumber. After weeks of tension, hearings, and underhanded tactics, Maplewood Commons was finally finished. The paint on the trim was still drying. The inside smelled like new carpet and potential. But outside, Derek stood in front of the ribbon with a giant pair of scissors and a grin that stretched ear to ear. The neighborhood gathered, curious and buzzing. They brought their lawn chairs, folding fans, even some homemade cookies. At 10:01 a.m., the ribbon dropped, the doors opened. The war, at least for now, paused. Maplewood Commons wasn't a fancy structure. It wasn't built to intimidate. It was a warm, open space with 4 rooms, 1 for classic board games, another for tabletop RPGs, a snack bar with self-serve popcorn, and a quiet room filled with puzzles and books. Families poured in. Kids dashed toward the oversized Connect 4. Retirees gravitated toward the Scrabble board. Teenagers grabbed cards and vanished into a corner booth. It wasn't chaos. It was community. And right outside the window, glaring from her porch in a lawn chair that had never once been unfolded before, sat Karen. She was alone. Her phone rested on her lap. She was filming. Again. Inside, Derek kept it light. He walked table to table, laughing, refilling drinks, teaching a couple how to play Ticket to Ride. But at noon, the crowd hushed as he stepped to the front with a mic. He cleared his throat. Maplewood Commons isn't just a game lounge. It's a place for stories, for coming together, 1 turn at a time. And today, we make a new memory. One that says, no matter who tries to divide a neighborhood, a little bit of laughter can always bring it back. The room applauded. But what came next turned claps into gasps. Derek walked over to a small shelf and pulled down a box labeled Karen's Rule Book. "House rules," he said with a smile. "Inspired by ... our very own HOA president." Laughter rippled through the room. He opened the box. Inside were joke cards. No dice louder than 3 decibels. All laughter must be HOA approved. Uno is banned after 8 p.m. Karen always wins Monopoly, or the game is invalid. Everyone cracked up. Everyone ... except Karen. The camera she was holding dropped to her lap. Her face flushed. Her jaw stiffened. Derek didn't look outside. He didn't have to. He knew what came next. Because earlier that morning, he had dropped off a flash drive at the HOA board president's mailbox, someone other than Karen. On it, footage pulled straight from Derek's security cams, time-stamped, clear audio. Karen on his porch at 3 a.m., whispering to a phone caller. "He thinks he's clever, but I've got the fines ready to go. I'll bury him in paper. If the city won't stop him, the HOA will. I'll backdate everything. They'll never prove it." An hour after Derek made his speech, the board met in emergency session. By evening, word had already spread. Karen's face wasn't just red, now it was public. A group of residents gathered outside the HOA clubhouse, not to complain, to demand her resignation. Linda was there. So were the bakers from the end of the street. Even Officer Ramirez, the same cop Karen had called 3 times about game noise, stood with a cup of lemonade, nodding silently. That night, a letter was taped to Karen's door. A motion of no confidence had been passed. The board voted 4-1. Karen was removed as HOA president, but she didn't react. No shouting. No revenge speech. She simply closed her door and turned off her lights. It felt like the end, but it wasn't. The next morning, Karen's house had new decorations, big white signs on the lawn. For sale by owner, quiet property. No noise, no games, no crowds. Owner will stay on site for all viewings. And taped to Derek's windshield, a single envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper, a printed copy of a property deed transfer application with Derek's name listed. And below that, a handwritten note in small, sharp letters. "You're not the only one who can buy land, Derek." She wasn't leaving the neighborhood. She was expanding. The envelope had no return address. Just the printed deed application and that one chilling line. "You're not the only one who can buy land, Derek." For the first time since this neighborhood war began, Derek felt the sting of real fear, not anger, not frustration, but a quiet, crawling unease. He immediately drove to the county assessor's office. The moment the clerk typed in Karen's name and hit enter, Derek's stomach dropped. Karen had purchased the lot behind his house, a small triangular wedge of land undeveloped and previously ignored, but now it had a new owner, and with it, a new plan. By Monday, a construction notice appeared on the new lot's perimeter. Karen hadn't wasted time. It listed the project as a restorative meditation courtyard. Derek could practically hear her voice in the wording. She wasn't just retaliating. She was building her own counter club right behind his home. And worse, this time, she was playing it smart. She filed through a shell nonprofit, clean paperwork, new names. But everyone on the street knew the truth. Karen wasn't leaving Maplewood, she was surrounding it. By Wednesday, strange workers arrived installing narrow cement pathways, fake water features, and polished quartz stones engraved with words like silence, stillness, and control. They worked early, just as Derek was leaving for work, and late into the night, as if daring him to complain. He didn't. He knew better, but she wasn't finished. The following day, Derek received a summons from the city. It wasn't for the club. It was for his own backyard. Karen had filed a formal complaint alleging that his fencing, outdoor lighting, and landscaping were encroaching on her newly acquired lot. She claimed property line violations and demanded inspection. Derek checked the survey. Everything was in place, but that didn't stop the inspector from knocking on his door with a clipboard and a neutral tone. Routine check, he said, walking the perimeter. New lot owner submitted a claim. Says your string lights are within 6 inches of her parcel. 6 inches. That was all it took. Derek paced his office after the inspection, hands on his hips, thinking. Every time he countered, she shifted. Every time he blocked her, she burrowed deeper. It was like playing chess with someone who moved the pieces when your eyes were closed. And then, he remembered the flash drive. The one he had only partially used at the HOA hearing. There was still more on it. More recordings, more footage, including one file labeled CAM2_backyard_Karen_3am.mov. Derek loaded the file. There she was. Captured by night vision. Karen, tiptoeing through the grass near his backyard. She measured fence posts with a tape, planted small flags. She even sprayed orange line paint on the dirt to create the illusion of a boundary dispute. Caught red-handed. This was more than HOA drama now. It was trespassing. He contacted Gina, his attorney, and they drafted a He also forwarded the video to the city's enforcement office, along with a signed affidavit and timestamps. The case was building. This time, he wasn't going to play defense. But Karen struck again faster. Within 24 hours, an email went out to every resident on Maplewood Lane, signed by the Friends of Serenity Coalition, inviting them to a grand opening of the Tranquility Retreat, a restorative garden dedicated to peaceful living and respectful neighbors. The event would take place directly behind Derek's house. The flyer included a list of speakers, a local yoga instructor, a self-proclaimed mindfulness coach, and, at the top, guest of honor, former HOA president Karen Dinsmore. It was a message, a public, subtle jab. And one more thing, ... The invitation ended with a note. We ask all attendees to please observe total silence for the final 15 minutes of the ceremony. Unnecessary noise will result in immediate removal. The community was divided now. Some neighbors supported Derek, others tired of the noise, the drama, the spectacle began siding with Karen, not because they believed her, but because she promised peace. And people will pick peace over truth if the noise gets loud enough. But Derek had one card left to play, as the fake tranquility movement gathered momentum. Derek reached into the vault of Karen's past. Old city records, previous addresses, a former HOA from another county, a place she'd once lived before Maplewood. There, in the dusty minutes of a small-town hearing, he found something unexpected. Karen had done this before. She'd been removed from another HOA presidency quietly, with a sealed settlement. The reason? Abuse of power, misuse of funds, retaliation through property, manipulation. And the best part, the lawyer who handled the case was now a county investigator. Derek picked up the phone. Hey, he said, I think I've got something. You'll want to see. Her name's Karen Dinsmore, and she's doing it again. Maplewood Lane woke to a strange sight. Karen's lawn, normally trimmed within a quarter-inch of perfection, was now cluttered with open house signs. Multiple ones, all different companies, all slightly crooked. It looked like her property was being sold by 5 different agents at once, but none of them were real. Derek spotted it immediately. One sign read Patricia Doan Realty, another listed a website that didn't even load. I had a fake QR code that, when scanned, led to a gif of a cat doing yoga. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so calculated, because over the next 3 days, prospective buyers arrived. A lot of them, only none were interested in Karen's house. They were tourists, fans, influencer, followers. Someone had leaked the war online. Derek's friend's daughter had posted a TikTok from the grand opening of Maplewood Commons. It got picked up, remixed, #now people were showing up to take selfies next to Karen's rulebook, play life-size Uno, and livestream themselves whispering Serenity Now across her fence. Karen lost it. She accused Derek of orchestrating the entire thing. She threatened lawsuits, called the city again, and tried to shut down the club for attracting digital vandals. But the city didn't bite. Derek, however, noticed something more disturbing. Karen was letting people into her house, strangers pretending to be buyers. But Derek had seen some of them before. A man with slicked back hair who'd once attended an HOA meeting from another city. A woman who'd been at the city zoning hearing weeks earlier. They weren't buyers. They were spies. Karen had created an illusion listing her house without any intention of selling. The fake open houses were a cover. She was inviting people in, people who could help her find a loophole, a weakness, something to dismantle Derek's club or pin, a new violation. She wasn't just retaliating now, she was recruiting. Meanwhile, Derek's call to the former county investigator paid off. A file arrived by courier, the sealed records of Karen's removal from her last HOA, financial discrepancies, board intimidation, retaliation disguised as policy enforcement. It was all documented. One entry stood out. A recorded board meeting where Karen allegedly threatened to burn the board down before giving up power. Same patterns, same language, different town. Derek showed the file to Gina, his lawyer, who lit up. This isn't just leverage, this is precedent. And if she's done this in multiple counties, we're no longer looking at petty harassment. We're looking at a case for targeted abuse. But before Derek could act, Karen struck again. Saturday afternoon, during peak hours at Maplewood Commons, the lights went out. All of them, power to the building cut mid-tournament. Families in mid-game, kids holding half-eaten cookies. Panic spread fast. Derek ran to the back and opened the fuse box. It wasn't tripped, it was cut. The main line had been sliced. He called the power company. The technician arrived within the hour and frowned as he examined the cables. This was no accident, he said. Someone did this intentionally. Surveillance footage caught a blurry figure hopping the fence at 2:46 a.m., wearing a hoodie and gloves. The figure's build. Too familiar to be coincidence. Karen didn't knock this time. She simply paced the edge of her property with a smug expression as the power company restored electricity. But Derek had already made up his mind. This wasn't a feud anymore. This was sabotage. That night, he filed a formal police report. Karen Dinsmore was officially under investigation for trespassing, electrical tampering, and sustained harassment. But the storm wasn't over, because the next morning, a group of neighbors received anonymous letters. Each one said the same thing. If you continue to support Maplewood Commons, the HOA will reevaluate your property compliance immediately. And at the bottom, a typed signature, concerned citizens for order. But everyone knew who wrote it. Karen was trying to turn the neighborhood against itself, pitting friend against friend, and it was working. The next HOA meeting was tense. Several residents pulled Derek aside, whispering they loved the club, but they couldn't afford sudden fines, couldn't risk retaliation, couldn't fight both Karen and the HOA machine. Derek left that meeting with a bitter taste in his mouth. But Linda followed him out. She put a hand on his shoulder. "You're close," she said. Too close for her to let this go. Derek looked across the street. Karen stood in her window, sipping tea, smiling. The final week of summer brought a strange calm to Maplewood Lane. No new violations, no surprise construction. Karen's fake open houses stopped. Her yard was quiet too. Quiet. Derek didn't trust it. He was still cleaning up the mess from the power sabotage damage to the wiring. Minor insurance claims, and worst of all, a ripple effect in the neighborhood. Some families began avoiding the club, worried about more retaliation. Membership dipped. Game nights shrank. And then, on a sleepy Tuesday morning, he got the notice. A full HOA audit initiated by Karen's last executive act before her removal. The board was forced to comply. Inspectors would be reviewing every property in the neighborhood for the next month, starting, of course, with Derek's house. It was her last grenade. If she couldn't shut the club down, she'd drown it in inspections, paperwork, and paranoia. Dart sat in Maplewood Commons that night alone, lights dim, sipping lukewarm coffee. The place felt colder, quieter. He stared at the framed sign near the entrance. Play fair, play bold. And then he had a thought. If she wanted a final round, he single quotes give her one. But this time, the board would be watching. The next morning, Derek scheduled a public neighborhood event. Nothing HOA related. No permits required. He called it the Maplewood Harmony Gathering. Open doors. All welcome doors. To unveil Karen. That night, the club filled again. Not for games but for truth. Derek took the mic at 7 p.m. sharp. His voice steady. Calm. I started Maplewood Commons because laughter was being treated like a crime. But this week, I realized something worse. Fear was winning. And fear only wins when we stay quiet. He clicked the remote, the big projector. Screen on the far wall flickered on. Security footage. Karen. 3:46 a.m. Entering the back lot with bolt cutters. Another clip. Karen placing flyers in mailboxes under a hoodie. Illegal. per federal law. Then came the audio. Recordings from HOA meetings edited just enough to meet legal standards. Karen threatening neighbors, pressuring board members, joking about watch lists. Murmurs filled the room. Some gasped, others stood in stunned silence. Derek ended with a city document freshly approved, the one that really mattered. It stated that Karen's newly formed nonprofit, the Tranquility Retreat, had been dissolved by the state due to fraudulent filings. It was no longer a legal entity. Her entire restorative garden was now subject to demolition if it violated zoning rules, and it did, by more than 10 feet. Karen, who had snuck into the event and stood quietly in the back, tried to slip out, but Derek saw her, and so did Linda. Going somewhere? Linda asked, loud enough for half the room to turn. Karen froze. The moment had arrived, not rage, not screaming, just silence. She stood there, in the glow of the projector, surrounded by the very people she'd tried to control. Not one of them defended her. No one moved, not even to help. She walked out alone. Later that week, she quietly listed her home with a real realtor. No flyers, no parades, just a quiet exit. It sold fast. And just like that, Karen Densmore was gone. But Maplewood would never be the same. 3 months later, the neighborhood had changed. Game nights were regular again, more diverse, more welcoming. The Commons now hosted birthday parties, poetry nights, chess tournaments, even community potlucks. But one thing still lingered, that sense that one person could nearly undo it all with a clipboard and a title. So, Derek ran for HOA president, and he won unanimously. His first act. 2 strike clause 1(1)(b) from the HOA bylaws permanently. His second, 2 frame Karen's fake open house flyer in the lobby of Maplewood Commons under a plaque that read, "Let the games begin and never end." But just when peace seemed real, something odd happened. One afternoon, a package arrived at the Commons. No return address. Inside, a deck of Uno cards, a garden gnome in a yoga pose, and a handwritten note. "Thanks for the lesson. Let's just say, I learned how to play better this time." No signature. But everyone knew Karen was still out there, watching, waiting somewhere, on someone else's street. So be warned. If your game nights suddenly start getting noise complaints, if someone installs a camera on your mailbox, if flyers start showing up without stamps, you just might have your own HOA Karen on the move. And if that day comes, play fair, play bold, and whatever you do, don't roll a 7.